I discovered that my daughter-in-law's 2 children from her previous marriage died before turning 1. Now, my son's baby is 6 months old and constantly sick. Last night, the doctor called me. We found something in the baby's tests. Your daughter-in-law is... What happened next made my heart race. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. The photograph slipped from the old medical file and landed face up on my kitchen table, stopping my heart mid-beat. I shouldn't have been looking through Sharon's papers. I know that now. But when you're 63 years old and your 6-month-old granddaughter has been hospitalized 4 times in as many months, maternal instinct overrides polite boundaries. My son Jason was at the hospital again with baby Aretha, and Sharon, my daughter-in-law, had asked me to bring her laptop charger from their bedroom. That's when I saw the cardboard box on the closet shelf, partially hidden behind winter coats. The box wasn't sealed, just sitting there, innocent as Sunday morning. Inside were medical records, but not Aretha's. These belonged to 2 other children. Lily Delora died at 7 months. Owen Delora died at 11 months. Delora was Sharon's maiden name. My hands trembled as I read the death certificates. Both children had succumbed to what the documents called sudden cardiac events following prolonged illness. Both had been under the care of Dr. Gerald Whitmore at Portland General Hospital before we moved here to Millbrook Creek, Oregon, 3 years ago. Sharon had mentioned her previous marriage once, maybe twice. She'd said it ended badly, that there had been losses she couldn't discuss. Jason had asked me not to pry. "She's been through enough, Mom," he'd said, his blue eyes pleading. "Let her heal." So I had. I'd welcomed her into our family, into the sprawling farmhouse that had belonged to my late husband's family for 4 generations. I'd taught her to can tomatoes, walked with her through the apple orchard, held her hand when she cried about things she wouldn't name. Now, staring at these files, I felt the floor of my understanding crack open. The photograph showed a young woman, Sharon, maybe 10 years younger, holding an infant. But it was the handwriting on the back that made my blood run cold. Lily, 4 months, last photo before transfer. Transfer? I heard Jason's truck in the driveway and quickly returned everything to the box, my heart hammering. But I kept the photograph, slipping it into my cardigan pocket like the coward I was becoming. That evening, over Sharon's famous pot roast, the one thing I'd taught her that she'd actually mastered, I watched her carefully. She was beautiful in that delicate way that made people want to protect her. Blonde hair always perfectly curled, green eyes that welled with tears at the slightest stress. Jason adored her, perhaps too much. "How's Aretha?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Stable," Jason said, exhaustion written across his 34-year-old face. He looked older lately, like he was aging in dog years. "They're running more tests. Her potassium levels are still irregular." "It's my fault," Sharon whispered, setting down her fork. "I should have noticed sooner. I'm her mother. I should have known something was wrong." "Sweetheart, no." Jason reached for her hand. "The doctors said these things are hard to catch." I said nothing, just cut my roast into smaller and smaller pieces. Later that night, alone in my bedroom on the 1st floor, I'd given Jason and Sharon the master suite upstairs when they'd moved in after Aretha was born. I couldn't sleep. The photograph burned like an accusation in my nightstand drawer. At 2 in the morning, I did what any grandmother in the digital age would do. I searched. Dr. Gerald Whitmore's name appeared in exactly 3 places online. The first was an old hospital directory from 2019. The second was a news article from 2021 about a medical license being suspended. The third was an obituary from 6 months ago. He'd died in a single car accident in Nevada. No next of kin listed. I was reading the article for the 3rd time when my phone buzzed. "Jason. Mom, we're at the hospital. Aretha's taken a turn. Can you come?" I drove the 15 miles to Millbrook Memorial in the pre-dawn darkness, my mind racing faster than my old Subaru. The hospital's fluorescent lights felt aggressive at 3 in the morning, turning everything the color of old bones. Aretha was in the pediatric ICU, her tiny body connected to machines that beeped and hummed. Sharon sat beside the crib, her face buried in her hands. Jason stood by the window, looking lost. "What happened?" I asked. Seizure, he said. They don't know why. A young doctor I didn't recognize appeared, clipboard in hand. Dr. Powell, according to his badge. He looked too tired to be making life-and-death decisions, but I supposed we all did at this hour. We're going to need to run a comprehensive toxicology screen, he said quietly, glancing at Sharon. Some of Aretha's symptoms are unusual. Unusual how? I asked. He hesitated. We're checking for everything. Environmental factors, medication interactions, metabolic disorders. It's just routine. But his eyes said it wasn't routine at all. Sharon looked up suddenly. I need air. She stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the linoleum. I can't breathe in here. She rushed out before Jason could follow. I'll go, I said, touching my son's arm. I found Sharon in the parking garage, leaning against a concrete pillar, her shoulders shaking. When I approached, she looked at me with such raw fear that I almost believed it was genuine. I can't lose another one, she whispered. I can't. The words hung between us like a confession she hadn't meant to make. Another one? I asked softly. Her eyes widened. I just meant. Jason told me you'd lost a child before, I said, lying smoothly. In your first marriage. Relief flickered across her face. 2. Both babies. It nearly destroyed me. That must have been terrible. You can't imagine. She wiped her eyes. That's why I'm so scared now. What if there's something wrong with me? What if I'm passing something genetic to my children? It was a reasonable fear, the kind a normal mother would have, but something in her delivery felt rehearsed, like lines she'd practiced in a mirror. We returned to find Jason in the hallway, talking urgently with Dr. Powell. They stopped when they saw us. Everything okay? Sharon asked. Fine, Jason said quickly. Just discussing next steps. But Dr. Powell's expression told a different story. He looked at Sharon with something I couldn't quite name. Not suspicion exactly. More like recognition. The next morning, after Jason insisted I go home and rest, I stood in my kitchen and called Portland General Hospital. It took 3 transfers and a small lie about being a family member before I reached the records department. I'm trying to track down information about 2 pediatric patients from 2020 and 2021, I said. Lily DeLaura and Owen DeLaura. They were under the care of Dr. Gerald Whitmore. The line went silent for a long moment. Ma'am, the woman said carefully, I'm not supposed to discuss sealed records. Sealed? Those cases were flagged by the state medical board. I really can't say more. Were the children really his patients? Another pause. Ma'am, Dr. Whitmore was stripped of his license in 2021. Any deaths attributed to him are under investigation. I suggest you contact the Oregon Medical Board if you have concerns. She hung up. My hands were shaking so badly I had to set down my coffee mug before I dropped it. Sealed records. Investigations. A dead doctor whose license had been revoked. I thought about Aretha, so tiny in that hospital bed. About Jason's exhausted face. About the photograph in my drawer with its cryptic inscription, Last photo before transfer. I was pulling out my laptop to search for the Oregon Medical Board when I heard the front door open. Sharon's voice floated through the house, bright and cheerful. Darlene, are you home? I closed the laptop quickly. In the kitchen. She appeared in the doorway, looking fresh despite the sleepless night, carrying a bouquet of sunflowers from the farm stand down the road. I thought these might cheer you up, she said, her smile warm. I know this has been hard on you too. She arranged the flowers in a vase while I watched. This woman who'd come into our lives 3 years ago with her sad story and her grateful smile, who'd married my son within 6 months, who'd given him a daughter 9 months later. Sharon, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. When you were married before, to your first husband, where did you live? Something flickered behind her eyes. Why do you ask? Just curious. Jason has never really told me about your life before here. We moved around a lot. His work. She adjusted a sunflower with unnecessary focus. Why the sudden interest in my past? No reason. Just making conversation. She turned to face me fully, and for just a moment, I saw something in her expression that made my stomach drop. It was gone in an instant, replaced by her usual gentle concern. But I'd seen it. calculation. You know, Darlene, she said softly, I've always appreciated how you've never pried into my life before Jason. It means a lot, that respect. It wasn't a threat exactly, but it wasn't not a threat either. After she left, to run errands, I sat at my kitchen table and spread out everything I knew. 2 dead children, a doctor with a revoked license, now deceased, a granddaughter getting sicker by the week, medical records hidden in a closet, a photograph labeled transfer. I pulled out the picture again, studying it in the afternoon light. Sharon looked younger, yes, but also different somehow, harder around the edges, and the baby, Lily, presumably, looked healthy. Pink cheeks, bright eyes, not like a child about to die. My phone rang. Jason. Mom, the hospital just called. His voice was strange, tight. They want to talk to us about Aretha's blood work. They're saying... He stopped. They're saying her symptoms might not be natural. The world tilted. What does that mean? I don't know. But they've called in someone from Child Protective Services. And, Mom, they're asking about Sharon's history, about whether she's ever... His voice broke. They're asking if she's ever hurt Aretha. What did you tell them? I said no. Of course no. But Mom, they seemed like they already knew something. Like they were confirming what they'd found, not asking. I looked at the photograph in my hand, at Sharon's young face, at the baby who was supposedly dead. Jason, I said slowly, I need to tell you something. About Sharon's past. About her other children. Mom, not now. I have to go. They want me back at the hospital. Jason, this is important. Later, okay? I'll call you when I know more. He hung up. I sat there in my kitchen, in the house where I'd raised my son, where 4 generations of my husband's family had lived and died, and I knew with absolute certainty that everything was about to come apart. The sun was setting when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Mrs. Watson, this is Dr. Powell from Millbrook Memorial. I couldn't speak freely earlier. We need to talk about your granddaughter. Alone. It's urgent. Can you come to the hospital tonight? Don't tell anyone. I stared at the message. Then I looked at the photograph one more time, at that cryptic word, transfer. And I understood. Not everything. Not yet. But enough to know that Aretha wasn't sick. She was in danger. I grabbed my purse and headed for the door, but as I reached for the handle, I heard a key turning in the lock. Sharon stepped inside, blocking my path. Her smile was gone. Going somewhere? She asked. Behind her, through the doorway, I saw a car I didn't recognize. A man in the driver's seat watching the house. Just to the store, I said, keeping my voice light. We're out of milk. At this hour? She closed the door behind her, locking it. I don't think so, Darlene. I think we need to talk. About boundaries. About privacy. About what happens to people who go through other people's things. My phone buzzed again in my pocket. I didn't dare look at it. I don't know what you mean, I said. She pulled something from her purse. The medical file. The one I'd found in her closet. You know exactly what I mean, she said softly. And now we have a problem. The man from the car was walking toward the house. Sharon, I said, forcing calm into my voice. I was looking for the laptop charger you asked me to find. The box was open. I didn't mean to violate my privacy? She set the medical file on the hall table with deliberate care. To go through my personal documents? To take things that don't belong to you? The photograph. She knew about the photograph. Through the window, I watched the man reach the porch steps. He was tall, mid-40s, wearing a sport coat that looked expensive. Not the kind of person who belonged in our rural neighborhood after dark. Who is that? I asked. A friend. Someone who helps me with difficult situations. Sharon's voice was soft, almost kind. It made my skin crawl. Darlene, I like you. I really do. You've been wonderful to me, welcoming me into your family, into your home. I don't want this to become unpleasant. The doorbell rang. Don't answer that, I said. It's my house too, Sharon replied, reaching for the door. Actually, I said, my voice sharper than intended, it's my house. My late husband left it to me. You and Jason live here as my guests." The words hung between us, ugly and true. Sharon's expression didn't change, but something cold moved behind her eyes. "Of course," she said smoothly. I misspoke. She opened the door. "Brian, come in." The man entered with the confidence of someone used to being in control. He had the kind of face that was hard to remember, pleasant, ordinary, forgettable. Exactly the kind of face you'd want if you were doing things you shouldn't. "Mrs. Watson," he said, extending his hand. "Brian Hardwick. I'm Sharon's attorney." I didn't shake his hand. "It's 9 o'clock at night. Legal emergencies don't keep business hours." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Sharon called me with some concerns about family dynamics, about accusations being made. I haven't accused anyone of anything." "No?" He pulled a small recording device from his pocket and pressed play. My own voice filled the hallway. "Jason, I need to tell you something. About Sharon's past. About her other children." He'd been listening, or Sharon had been recording me, or my phone was. I felt sick. "That's taken out of context," I said. "Is it?" Brian clicked off the device. "Because from where I'm standing, it sounds like you're trying to poison your son's marriage with unfounded suspicions about his wife's tragic past." "Those children died of natural causes," Sharon interrupted, her voice breaking on cue. "Genetic disorders the doctors couldn't identify in time. It destroyed my first marriage. I've spent 3 years in therapy trying to heal. And now you're trying to what? Suggest I had something to do with it?" She was good. Tears welled in her eyes. Her hands trembled just enough. If I didn't know what I knew, I'd believe her completely. "I found a photograph," I said, with writing on the back. "Last photo before transfer. Transfer to hospice care," Sharon said without missing a beat. "Lily was in home hospice for her final week. That photo was taken before we transferred her to the facility. I keep it because it's the last time she looked happy. The lie was perfect, seamless, probably rehearsed." "And Dr. Whitmore?" I asked. "The doctor who lost his license?" Brian stepped forward. "Mrs. Watson, I strongly advise you to stop this line of inquiry. Dr. Whitmore's personal troubles have nothing to do with the care he provided. Making unfounded accusations about a deceased physician could open you to serious legal liability. Legal liability for asking questions? For harassment? For defamation? For causing emotional distress to a grieving mother?" His voice was pleasant, conversational. "Sharon has been documenting incidents for several weeks now. The intrusive questions, the suspicious looks, the way you watch her when she's with Aretha." My stomach dropped. "That's not... You've been under a lot of stress," Sharon said gently, dabbing at her eyes. "Jason mentioned you haven't been sleeping well, that you've been forgetting things. It's understandable at your age. The strain of having us here, of Aretha's illness." She was building a narrative, making me sound unstable, elderly, and confused. "I'm 63, not 90, I said. "And there's nothing wrong with my memory." "Of course not," Brian said. "But perception matters, especially if Jason had to choose between his mother and his wife, between someone making accusations and someone being accused of..." "What exactly? What are you suggesting happened to those children?" The question was a trap. If I said what I was really thinking, that the children might not be dead, that they might have been sold, I'd sound completely insane. "I don't know," I admitted. "That's why I was researching." "Then let me save you the trouble," Brian said. "Those children died. There are death certificates, burial records, everything properly documented. If you continue to harass Sharon about her past trauma, we'll have no choice but to pursue legal action and request that you maintain distance from the family. You can't keep me from my granddaughter. We can if a court determines you're unstable. If you're making wild accusations that could harm Aretha's home environment." He smiled that empty smile again. "But it won't come to that. Because you're going to drop this. You're going to apologize to Sharon. And you're going to remember that sometimes terrible things just happen. No conspiracy, no mystery, just tragedy." My phone buzzed again in my pocket. Dr. Powell probably, waiting for me at the hospital. "I need to go," I said. "Where?" Sharon asked. Out. I don't need permission to leave my own house. Brian positioned himself casually in front of the door. Actually, Sharon mentioned you seemed agitated earlier, possibly confused. I think it might be best if you stayed home tonight. Rested. Let Jason handle things at the hospital. You can't keep me here. No one's keeping you anywhere, he said reasonably. I'm just concerned for your safety. You shouldn't be driving when you're upset. The subtext was clear. If I tried to leave, they'd physically stop me. And then they'd use it as evidence that I was unstable, that I'd become aggressive or confused. I was trapped. Fine, I said. I'll stay. But I want you both to leave. Of course, Brian said. Sharon, why don't you go pack a bag? You and Jason can stay at the guest house on the property tonight. Give everyone some space. The guest house. 200 yards from the main house, across the orchard. Far enough that they could come and go without me knowing. Far enough that I couldn't keep an eye on what they were doing. After they left, I stood in my kitchen and tried to think. My phone showed 3 missed calls from Dr. Powell and 2 texts. Mrs. Watson, please come to the hospital. It's critical. If I don't hear from you by 10 p.m., I'll have to proceed with mandatory reporting. It was 9:47. I called him back, keeping my voice low. Dr. Powell, it's Darlene Watson. I'm sorry I missed. Where are you? His voice was urgent. Are you safe? I'm home. Sharon was just here with her attorney. Listen to me carefully. Aretha's blood work showed evidence of antifreeze poisoning. Small doses, administered over time. We're required to report this to the police and CPS. But there's something else. He paused. Your daughter-in-law's name flagged in our system. She's been on a medical watch list for 3 years. A watch list? Hospitals across 5 states have reported concerns about her behavior. Pattern of seeking medical attention for children with increasingly severe symptoms, always at different hospitals. The children recover when she's not present, worsen when she returns. It's called Munchausen by proxy, I whispered. That's what we thought initially. But there's more. 2 other children are listed as deceased under her care. The circumstances were flagged as suspicious, but there wasn't enough evidence for criminal charges. The investigation is still technically open. She's been moving between states, staying ahead of the investigations. That's our concern. Mrs. Watson, where is Aretha now? At the hospital with you. No. Jason checked her out 3 hours ago, against medical advice. He said Sharon insisted that she wanted to take Aretha home where she'd be more comfortable. The room spun. That's impossible. Jason just called me from the hospital. When? I checked my phone. The call from Jason had come at 7:15, over 2 hours ago. Mrs. Watson, we need to find that baby. Now. I've already contacted the police, but... The line went dead. I looked at my phone. No signal. I walked to the window and saw Brian in his car, still parked at the end of my driveway. In his hand, something that looked like a phone. A signal jammer. They'd cut me off. I ran to the landline in the hallway. Dead. They'd cut that too. Through the kitchen window I could see lights on in the guest house. Sharon and Jason were there. With Aretha. Or without her. I thought about Dr. Powell's words. 2 other children listed as deceased. Investigation still open. Not dead. Listed as dead. Like the photograph said, last photo before transfer. The children hadn't died. They'd been transferred. Sold. Given away. Hidden. And now Aretha was missing from the hospital, taken by parents who shouldn't have had custody, and I was trapped in my house with no way to call for help. I looked at my laptop. If the phone signal was jammed, maybe I could get online, send an email to the police, to anyone. But when I opened it, there was a new message waiting in my email inbox. From an address I didn't recognize. The subject line read, "Stop asking questions." I opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a photograph. Aretha, sleeping peacefully in her car seat. But the background wasn't the hospital. It wasn't the guest house. It was somewhere else entirely. A room with industrial metal shelves and harsh fluorescent lighting. Below the photo, a message. Your granddaughter is safe, for now. But if you contact the police, if you tell anyone what you think you know, that changes. You're a smart woman, Darlene. Smart enough to understand that some secrets are better left buried. Smart enough to know that an old lady living alone on a farm could have any number of accidents. Make the right choice. I stared at the photo, at my granddaughter's tiny face, and felt something shift inside me. They'd threatened me. They'd tried to make me feel old, confused, powerless. They'd made a mistake. I might be 63, but I'd raised a son alone after my husband died. I'd run this farm through droughts and floods and economic recessions. I'd buried my parents and my husband and half my friends, and I was still standing. I'd survived things these people couldn't imagine, and I'd be damned if I'd let them hurt my granddaughter. I closed the laptop and went to my bedroom. From the back of my closet, I pulled out the fireproof box where I kept important documents. Inside were the property deeds, my will, insurance papers. And underneath all that, something I hadn't looked at in 15 years. My husband's detective notebooks. Robert had been a private investigator before he retired to farm. He'd taught me things. How to document evidence. How to follow paper trails. How to think like someone with something to hide. I spread out the notebooks and started reading, looking for anything that might help. That's when I found it. Tucked into a page dated 2008, a newspaper clipping about a human trafficking ring in Portland. And a note in Robert's handwriting. Medical angle. Doctors falsifying death certificates. Babies taken at hospitals. The case had never been solved. The ring had disappeared before police could make arrests. 15 years ago. Right around the time Sharon would have been in her early 20s. My phone suddenly buzzed. The signal was back. A text from Jason. Mom, I'm sorry about earlier. Sharon explained everything. I know you're worried, but Aretha is fine. We're all fine. Please don't make this harder than it needs to be. I love you. I stared at the message. The words were Jason's, but the sentiment felt coached. Manufactured. Another text arrived, this time from an unknown number. 2 hours, Mrs. Watson. That's how long you have to decide. Tell the police what you know, and Aretha disappears. Stay quiet, and everyone stays safe. Tick-tock. I looked out the window at the guest house, at Brian's car still blocking my driveway, at the dark orchard between my house and freedom. 2 hours. I picked up my husband's notebook and started planning. The first thing Robert had taught me was that people who think they're in control make mistakes. They get comfortable, cocky. They forget that someone is always watching. I turned off all the lights in the house except my bedroom lamp, visible from the guest house. Let them think I was going to bed, accepting defeat. Then I went to the basement. Our farmhouse was built in 1887, during a time when people kept secrets in walls and floors. Robert had shown me all the hidden spaces. The root cellar that connected to the old barn, the crawl space that led to the storm shelter, the forgotten door behind the water heater that opened into a tunnel my husband's grandfather had dug during Prohibition. That tunnel ran underneath the orchard and came up in the old equipment shed, 50 yards past the guest house. I grabbed a flashlight and Robert's notebook, then squeezed through the narrow door. The tunnel smelled of earth and time. My knees protested as I crawled through the darkness, but I kept moving. If Brian was watching the house, he'd expect me to stay put. He wouldn't expect a 63-year-old woman to be crawling through a tunnel like a commando. I emerged in the equipment shed 15 minutes later, covered in dust and cobwebs. Through the grimy window, I could see Brian's car at the main house. No movement. The guest house lights were on, shadows passing behind the curtains. I needed to get to town, to the police. But more than that, I needed evidence they couldn't deny. My old pickup truck was in the barn, hidden from view. I kept the keys on a hook by the workbench, another of Robert's habits. Always have an escape route, he used to say. I was reaching for the keys when I heard voices. Don't understand why we can't just move her tonight. Jason's voice, frustrated and scared. Because the timing has to be perfect. Sharon's voice was different now, colder. No more trembling sweetness. We move too fast. Questions get asked. The death certificate needs to be filed first. The grief needs to look real. I pressed myself against the barn wall, barely breathing. I can't do this anymore, Jason said. My mother knows something. What if she already called the police? She didn't. Brian made sure of that. And even if she tries, who's going to believe her? An old woman making wild accusations about her daughter-in-law? After we've documented her erratic behavior, her mental decline. She's not declining. She's sharp as ever. Not for long. Sharon's voice was matter of fact. Brian's handling it. By tomorrow morning, she'll have had a tragic accident. Old woman, living alone, probably got confused, fell down the stairs. Very sad. My blood turned to ice. You can't. Jason's voice cracked. That's my mother. And Aretha is our daughter. Do you want her to grow up in poverty? Do you want to keep struggling on this failing farm? Sharon's voice softened, persuasive. We've been through this. The couple in Seattle is paying $200,000. Tax-free. Enough to start over somewhere warm, somewhere new. Aretha goes to people who desperately want a child. People who can give her everything. Everyone wins. Except Aretha, Jason whispered. Aretha gets a better life than we could ever give her. And we get our freedom. But the hospital knows. They did blood tests. The hospital knows I'm a concerned mother whose baby was sick. The antifreeze was a mistake. We won't use that method again. Too detectable. Brian has a better solution for tomorrow. Tomorrow? The couple is flying in tomorrow night. We hand over Aretha, get the money, and we're gone before anyone realizes what happened. Your mother's accident happens in the morning. By the time anyone investigates, we'll be in Mexico. I had to grip the barn wall to stay upright. My son, my Jason, he was part of this. What about the others? Jason asked quietly. Your other children, were they sold? Yes, all of them. Lily and Owen went to couples in California. Good homes, as far as I know. The first one, from my real first marriage, went to a family in Nevada. That was 8 years ago. Dr. Whitmore helped me with all of them. And your first husband? The real one? Didn't ask questions until it was too late. By then I was gone. He tried to find me, tried to report me, but without proof. She laughed softly. People don't believe fathers when they say mothers hurt children. They especially don't believe men who claim their babies were stolen. They just think he's bitter about the divorce. Does Brian? Brian's been my partner for 6 years. He finds the buyers, handles the paperwork, moves the money. We've sold 11 children together. 11 families who think their babies died. 11 desperate couples who ask no questions about where their adopted children really came from. 11 children. I felt my dinner rising in my throat. I don't know if I can do this, Jason said. You don't have a choice. You're already in it. You signed the life insurance policy on Aretha. You took her out of the hospital. The police find out. You're looking at conspiracy to commit murder, child trafficking, fraud. You'll spend the rest of your life in prison. Her voice hardened. So you'll do exactly what I say. We move Aretha tomorrow. We get our money, and we start our new life. Or you can go to prison. Your choice. Footsteps. They were walking back to the guest house. I waited until they were inside, then grabbed the truck keys and ran. I drove with the lights off until I reached the main road, then floored it toward town. Millbrook Creek had one police station, a small brick building next to the post office. I burst through the doors at 10:47 p.m., startling the young officer at the desk. I need to report a kidnapping, I gasped, and attempted murder, and child trafficking. The officer, his name tag said Deputy Marsh, looked at me with the practiced patience of someone used to late-night drama. Ma'am, slow down. What's your name? Darlene Watson. My granddaughter Aretha is in danger. My daughter-in-law is planning to sell her to human traffickers. Tomorrow night. I heard them talking. Mrs. Watson? A voice from the back office. Sheriff Tom Bradley emerged, his face grim. We've been trying to reach you. Dr. Powell from the hospital filed a report about your granddaughter. Relief flooded through me. Then you know. You know about Sharon. We know about the allegations. He exchanged a glance with Deputy Marsh. But Mrs. Watson, we also received a call about an hour ago from your son Jason. He's filed a missing persons report. What? He says you left your house in an agitated state after making accusations against his wife. He's worried about you. Says you've been having memory problems, acting paranoid. That's a lie. I'm not the one. He also mentioned you've been going through his wife's personal belongings, making unfounded accusations about her dead children. Sheriff Bradley's voice was gentle but firm. Mrs. Watson, I've known you for 20 years. I know you're a smart, capable woman, but grief and stress can do strange things to people. I'm not grieving or stressed. I'm telling you the truth. Sharon admitted it. I heard her. She sold 11 children. She's planning to sell Aretha tomorrow night to buyers in Seattle. Her lawyer Brian is involved. They're going to kill me tomorrow morning and make it look like an accident. I heard how I sounded. Frantic. Paranoid. Exactly how Sharon had wanted me to sound. Ma'am, Deputy Marsh said carefully, do you have any proof of these allegations? I have. I stopped. What did I have? A photograph that Sharon had explained away. A newspaper clipping from 15 years ago. Overheard conversations that I couldn't prove. I heard them talking in the barn. I can show you. You heard them from where exactly? Sheriff Bradley asked. I was hiding in the barn. I came through the tunnel. I saw their faces. There's a tunnel. From the basement to the equipment shed. My husband built it. His grandfather built it. During Prohibition. So you tunneled under your property to spy on your son and daughter-in-law? I wasn't spying. They cut my phone lines. They blocked my cell signal. They trapped me in my house. Mrs. Watson, Sheriff Bradley said gently, I drove past your farm an hour ago. All the lights were on. Your car was in the driveway. Nobody was holding you prisoner. Because I escaped through the tunnel. They looked at each other again. That look. The one that said, confused elderly woman, possible dementia, needs help. I'm not crazy, I said, hearing the desperation in my voice. Call Dr. Powell. He'll tell you about Aretha's blood work. About the antifreeze. We did call Dr. Powell, Sheriff Bradley said. He told us about the suspicious findings. We sent an officer to the guest house to check on Aretha. She's fine, sleeping peacefully. No signs of distress or abuse. That's impossible. Sharon said. Sharon was very cooperative. She showed the officer Aretha's medical records, explained the situation. Dr. Powell's concerns were noted, but there's no evidence of active harm. He paused. However, given the accusations you've been making, and your state of mind tonight, we do have concerns about Aretha's safety around you. The world tilted. Around me? Mrs. Watson, you broke into your son's residence. It's my property. You've been making wild accusations about your daughter-in-law. You admit to spying on them, to going through their private belongings. You're claiming conspiracies, murder plots, trafficking rings. His voice softened. I think you need help. Medical help. Let me call someone. No. I backed toward the door. No, you don't understand. She's planned this. She's made me look unstable so no one would believe me. That's how she operates. Mrs. Watson, please don't leave. We need to... But I was already out the door, running for my truck. I heard Sheriff Bradley shouting behind me, heard Deputy Marsh's radio crackling to life, but I didn't stop. I drove into the darkness, my hands shaking on the wheel. They didn't believe me. Worse, they thought I was the danger. Sharon had beaten me to it. She'd called Jason, had him file the report, had the sheriff check on Aretha. Everything clean, everything explained, and me looking like a paranoid old woman having a breakdown. I pulled over on a dark road and tried to think. I had maybe 3 hours before they'd issue a warrant for my safety, or Aretha's safety from me. 3 hours before I was picked up, evaluated, possibly committed for psychiatric observation. 3 hours before Sharon moved Aretha and disappeared forever. I needed proof they couldn't deny. Something concrete. I pulled out my phone and started searching. Dr. Gerald Whitmore. Dead doctors don't talk, but they leave paper trails. After 20 minutes of searching, I found something. An obituary mentioned he'd been survived by a sister, Margaret Whitmore Ross, living in Portland. I called information, got a number, and dialed despite the late hour. Hello? A woman's voice, groggy. Ms. Ross? My name is Darlene Watson. I'm sorry to call so late, but this is an emergency. It's about your brother Gerald. Silence. Then, who gave you this number? Please. My granddaughter is in danger. Your brother was involved in falsifying death certificates for babies that were actually being trafficked. A woman named Sharon Delora worked with him. I need proof. How do you know that name? Her voice was sharp now, awake. She's my daughter-in-law. She's planning to get away from her. Right now. Whatever she's planning, she'll do it. She's done it before. I know. I heard her confess. But the police don't believe me. I need evidence. I have files. Documents my brother kept before he died. I think he was planning to go to the police, but then… She paused. His car accident wasn't an accident. I've always known that. Come to Portland. I'll give you everything I have. I don't have time. She's moving my granddaughter tomorrow. Then I'll come to you. Where are you? I gave her directions to a truck stop halfway between Portland and Millbrook Creek. Can you meet me in 2 hours? I'll be there. I hung up and sat in the darkness, my heart pounding. Finally, I had something. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. We know you went to the police. We know they didn't believe you. You have 1 hour now, Darlene. Bring the evidence you think you have to the old grain mill on Route 9. Alone. We'll trade Aretha for whatever you've got. Otherwise, you'll never see your granddaughter again. I stared at the message. It was a trap. Obviously. But it was also confirmation that they were worried, that somewhere in what I knew or had, there was something dangerous to them. I looked at the time. Margaret Ross wouldn't arrive for 2 hours. The grain mill was 20 minutes away. I could wait for proof, go through proper channels, hope the system worked. Or I could go to the mill now, alone and unprotected, and face whatever was waiting. I thought about Aretha, 6 months old, innocent, about to be sold to strangers. I thought about Jason, trapped in something he didn't know how to escape. I thought about 11 other children, scattered across the country, growing up never knowing they'd been stolen. I started the truck and drove toward the grain mill. If I was going to die tonight, I'd at least know I tried. The old grain mill had been abandoned for 30 years, a skeletal tower of rusted metal and rotting wood that loomed against the night sky like a warning. I parked my truck a quarter mile away and approached on foot, Robert's voice echoing in my memory. Never walk into a situation you can't walk out of. But I was walking into it anyway. The main building was 3 stories of industrial decay. Broken windows gaped like missing teeth. The loading dock where farmers once brought their harvest now sprouted weeds through cracked concrete. A single light glowed in a second-floor window, the only sign of life. I was halfway across the parking lot when my phone rang. Unknown number. Mrs. Watson. Brian's voice smooth as ever. I'm impressed you came. Most people your age would be home hiding under the covers. Where's Aretha? Safe. For now. Are you alone? I looked around the empty lot. Yes. Good. Because we have eyes on all the roads. If you brought police or if anyone follows you, the deal's off. Come to the second floor. The stairs on the east side still work. Mostly. He hung up. I found the stairs. A rickety external staircase that groaned under my weight. Each step felt like it might be my last, and not because of the trafficking ring. The metal was corroded, the bolts loose. One wrong move and I'd plunge 20 feet to the concrete below. I reached the second floor and entered through a doorway that had lost its door. The space inside was vast and empty, a cathedral of abandonment. Moonlight streamed through broken skylights, creating pools of silver on the dusty floor. Brian stood in one of those pools, backlit like an actor on a stage. He was alone. Where is she? I demanded. Nearby. First, we talk. He gestured to a chair, incongruously new and clean, obviously brought here for this meeting. Sit. I'll stand. Suit yourself. He pulled out his phone and showed me a photograph. Aretha asleep in a car seat, same as before. But this photo was time-stamped. 11:34 p.m., 14 minutes ago. She's fine, peaceful, probably dreaming about whatever babies dream about. What do you want? The same thing you want. A resolution. He pocketed his phone. You're a problem, Darlene. A stubborn, inconvenient problem. But you're also a rational woman. So let's be rational together. Rational? You're selling babies. We're facilitating adoptions for families who can't navigate the broken foster system. We're giving children better lives than their biological parents could provide. We're helping everyone. His voice was reasonable, practiced. I wondered how many times he'd given this speech. Think about it. Sharon's children go to wealthy couples who desperately want them. Those couples pay well for the privilege. Sharon and Jason get financial security. The children get opportunities they'd never have otherwise. Where's the harm? Where's the harm? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You're stealing children, falsifying death certificates, making families grieve for babies who aren't dead, families who couldn't care for them properly anyway, he said dismissively. Sharon's first husband was an abusive addict. Her second was unemployed and unstable. And your son? He smiled. Let's be honest, Darlene. That farm is failing. Jason is drowning in debt. He can barely feed himself, let alone a child. Aretha's better off with the Seattle family. That's not your decision to make. Actually, it is. Because we're the ones with the power here. He stepped closer. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to go home. You're going to tell Sheriff Bradley that you had a panic attack, that you're sorry for the confusion, that you're seeking help for your anxiety. Tomorrow morning, you're going to witness a terrible tragedy. Aretha will succumb to her genetic illness. You'll comfort Jason, you'll attend the funeral, and then you'll move on with your life. And if I refuse? Then tomorrow morning you'll have your accident. Jason will find you at the bottom of your stairs. The whole town will talk about how tragic it is, how the stress of Aretha's illness must have made you dizzy, how you fell. Very sad. And Aretha still goes to Seattle, but now Jason has to grieve both his mother and his daughter. He tilted his head. Is that the legacy you want? To die for nothing? You can't make me stay quiet. Can't we? Darlene, you went to the police tonight. They think you're unstable. If you keep talking, you'll be committed for psychiatric evaluation. Do you know what happens to elderly people in those facilities? They medicate you, keep you docile. By the time you get out, if you get out, Aretha will be long gone, the trail will be cold, and no one will believe anything you say. He pulled an envelope from his jacket. Or you could take this. What is it? $50,000. Cash. Your payment for keeping quiet. Think of it as a retirement bonus. You could travel, fix up the farm, finally relax. He set it on the chair. All you have to do is nothing. I looked at the envelope, at this man who thought everyone had a price. Where are the other children? I asked. The 11 Sharon sold. Where are they? Happy, healthy, better off. I want names, locations, proof they're safe. Brian laughed. You want me to compromise 11 families? Destroy 11 children's lives by telling them they're stolen? For what? Your peace of mind? For justice. Justice. He said the word like it tasted bad. Justice is a fairy tale we tell ourselves to feel important. Reality is that those children have parents who love them, homes that are safe, futures that are bright. You want to rip that away because of some abstract moral principle? I want to stop you from hurting more children. We're not hurting anyone. We're solving problems. He checked his watch. You have 30 seconds to decide. Take the money and walk away, or refuse and face the consequences. I thought about Aretha, about Jason, about 11 children growing up never knowing the truth. I need proof Aretha's alive, I said. Let me see her. Not possible. Then no deal. Brian sighed. You're making this harder than it needs to be. He pulled out his phone and made a call. Bring her up. We waited in silence. I heard footsteps on the stairs. Then Sharon appeared, carrying Aretha in a car seat. My granddaughter was awake, her eyes wide and curious. There, Brian said. Alive and well. Satisfied? I started toward them, but Brian stepped in my way. No touching. You look, then you decide. Aretha saw me and smiled. That toothless baby smile that makes your heart break and soar simultaneously. She reached her tiny hand toward me. Gammy, Sharon cooed in a mocking tone. Look, it's Gammy. Say goodbye. Sharon, I said quietly, you were someone's daughter once. Someone's baby. Did your mother know what you'd become? For just a second, something flickered across her face. Pain, maybe. Or memory. Then it was gone. My mother sold me for drug money when I was 3. I lived in 7 foster homes before I aged out at 18. So yes, Darlene, I know exactly what it's like to be unwanted. That's why I make sure these babies go to people who actually want them. By lying to everyone, by making families grieve, by giving children a chance. Her voice hardened. You have no idea what it's like to be raised by people who resent your existence. These babies deserve better. And the families who adopt them deserve children without the baggage of knowing they were taken. That's not love. That's kidnapping with good intentions. Call it whatever you want. She shifted Aretha's car seat. But it's happening. The Seattle family is already at the airport. They fly out at 6 a.m. with Aretha. By the time anyone questions anything, they'll be in Canada. Canada? The family has dual citizenship. Once they cross the border with Aretha, she's beyond U.S. jurisdiction. You'll never find her. She'll grow up as their daughter, with their name, in their world. And in 10 years, she won't even remember you existed. The words hit like physical blows. Brian checked his watch again. Time's up, Darlene. What's it going to be? I looked at Aretha. At Sharon. At the envelope full of blood money. I need to use the restroom, I said. Brian blinked. What? I'm 63 years old and I've been under extreme stress. I need to use the restroom before I make a decision. He exchanged a glance with Sharon. There's no restroom here. Then I'll step outside for a moment. Unless you want me to have an accident right here. Fine. 2 minutes. Sharon, go with her. We went down the creaking stairs. Sharon carrying Aretha, me following behind. At the bottom, Sharon set down the car seat and pulled out a cigarette. This is ridiculous, she muttered. We should just what? I asked. Kill me here? Stage an accident at an abandoned mill? That's a lot harder to explain than a fall downstairs at home. She lit the cigarette, studied me. You're smarter than I gave you credit for. And you're younger than you act. How old are you really? 28? 30? 32. Old enough to know how the world works. Old enough to have destroyed a lot of lives. Old enough to have survived when I shouldn't have. She took a drag. You want to judge me? Fine. But you grew up in a nice house with parents who loved you. You married a good man who left you a farm and a future. You have no idea what it's like to have nothing, to be nothing, to know that society has already written you off. So you decided to write off your own children? They're not my children. They're inventory, products, a means to an end. She flicked ash onto the ground. And honestly, they're better off with families who want them. I never wanted to be a mother. I'm terrible at it. But I'm excellent at creating what other people want. What about Jason? Did you ever love him? She laughed. Love? Darlene, grow up. I targeted your son because you have property, resources, a good reputation in the community. He's useful. But love? Love is for people who can afford it. Aretha started fussing in her car seat. Sharon ignored her. Can I hold her? I asked. One last time? No. Please. You're taking her forever. Let me say goodbye properly. Sharon studied me, calculating. Fine. But Brian's watching from the window. You try anything and it ends badly for everyone. I knelt down and lifted Aretha from the car seat. She was warm and solid and perfect. I held her close, memorizing the weight of her, the baby smell of her hair, the way she grabbed at my finger. I'm sorry, I whispered. I'm so sorry. And then I ran. I clutched Aretha to my chest and ran into the darkness, away from the mill, toward the trees at the edge of the property. Behind me, Sharon screamed. Darlene! Brian! She's running! I heard footsteps pounding down the stairs, heard Brian shouting into his phone. But I had a head start, and I knew something they didn't. I'd grown up running through woods in the dark. My father had been a hunter. He'd taught me how to move silently, how to use terrain, how to disappear. I made it to the tree line and kept running, holding Aretha tight, whispering, It's okay, baby. Grandma's got you. It's okay. A flashlight beam swept through the trees behind me. Voices calling my name. I ran deeper into the woods, my heart hammering, my lungs burning. Aretha started crying, loud, piercing wails that would lead them right to us. Shh, baby, please, I whispered desperately. Please be quiet. But she cried louder, her wails echoing through the forest. The flashlight beams were getting closer. I could hear them crashing through the underbrush, Brian's voice shouting coordinates to someone. I stumbled into a small clearing and stopped, gasping. I couldn't run anymore. My 63-year-old body had hit its limit. Aretha screamed in my arms, terrified by the chaos. The flashlights converged on us. Brian emerged from the trees, Sharon behind him, both breathing hard. "That was stupid," Brian said. "Really, really stupid." He pulled something from his jacket. Not a weapon. Worse. A phone. "I just sent a message to Sheriff Bradley," he said. "Told him you kidnapped Aretha from the guest house, that you're having a complete mental breakdown, that you're dangerous." He held up the phone so I could see. "In about 5 minutes, every cop in the county will be hunting for you. And when they find you, and they will, they'll see exactly what we've been saying. A disturbed old woman who stole her granddaughter. Who needs to be locked up for everyone's safety? They'll find out the truth," I said. "Margaret Ross has evidence. Dr. Whitmore's files." "You mean the files that were destroyed in a house fire 3 hours ago?" Sharon smiled. "What? You thought we didn't know you called her? We've had her phone tapped for months. After she talked to you, we had someone pay her a visit. Very unfortunate accident. Gas leak, probably. The whole house went up. Her and all her brother's files. The world spun. You killed her. We protected our investment, just like we're protecting it now." She stepped closer. "Give me my daughter, Darlene. This is over." In the distance, I heard sirens. "That's the police," Brian said. "Coming for you. Dangerous grandmother kidnaps baby, flees into the woods. They'll tackle you, take Aretha, and you'll spend the rest of your life in a facility." He held out his arms. "Give her to me. Now." I looked down at Aretha in my arms, at her tiny face, her innocent eyes. The sirens were getting closer. I had no evidence, no proof, no way to save her. I'd failed. "Darlene," Brian's voice was almost gentle. "It's over. You tried. You fought hard. But you lost. Give me the baby." I looked at Aretha one last time. Then I looked past Brian into the darkness, where I'd seen something he hadn't noticed. A second set of flashlights, moving fast, spread out in a search pattern. But they weren't coming from the road where the police would be. They were coming from deeper in the woods. "No," I said. "I don't think I will." And I ran again, toward those lights, screaming at the top of my lungs. "Help! Someone help us! They're trying to take my granddaughter!" Brian cursed and lunged after me, but I was already at the edge of the clearing. Aretha clutched to my chest, running toward whoever was in those woods. Please, I thought. Please let it be someone who'll listen. The flashlights turned toward my voice. I heard someone shout, "Over there!" Then I broke through the trees and nearly collided with a state police officer. "Please," I gasped, Aretha wailing in my arms. "Please help us. They're trying to take her. They're going to—" "Mrs. Watson?" The officer, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes, put her hand on my shoulder. "Darlene Watson?" "Yes. How did you—" "Dr. Powell called us. He was worried when you didn't show up at the hospital. He thought you might be in danger." She looked past me as Brian and Sharon emerged from the trees. "Are these the people threatening you?" "That's my daughter-in-law and her lawyer. They've been selling babies. They killed someone tonight. They're trying to—" "Officer, thank goodness you're here." Brian's voice was smooth, concerned. "This is exactly what we were afraid of. Mrs. Watson has experienced a serious mental health crisis. She took her granddaughter from our home." "That's a lie." I clutched Aretha tighter. "They're human traffickers. They've sold 11 children. They were going to sell Aretha to buyers in Seattle tonight." "There are no buyers," Sharon said, her voice breaking perfectly. "There's just a sick baby and a grandmother who's having delusions. Officer, please, my daughter needs her medication. She has a heart condition. Darlene took her without her medicine." "Aretha doesn't have a heart condition," I said. "They've been poisoning her, making her sick so they could—" "Mrs. Watson?" another officer said, approaching from the side. Male, younger, hand resting on his belt. "I need you to hand over the baby. Right now. No. You don't understand. Ma'am, I'm not going to ask again. The female officer held up her hand. Wait. Carter, stand down. She looked at me. Mrs. Watson, I'm Sergeant Linda Hayes. I worked with Dr. Powell on a case 3 years ago. He's a good man, and he doesn't scare easily. When he called us tonight, he said something was very wrong, that you'd uncovered something dangerous. She glanced at Brian and Sharon. So, before we do anything else, I want to hear your side. All of it. Sergeant Hayes, Brian said. With all due respect, this woman is clearly unstable. She's making wild accusations without any evidence. I'll decide what's wild and what's evidence, Hayes said sharply. You can wait right there. Mrs. Watson, talk to me. So I did. Standing in those dark woods with Aretha in my arms and 6 state police officers listening, I told them everything. The hidden medical files, the dead doctor with a revoked license, the overheard conversation in the barn, Margaret Ross and the house fire, the confession at the mill. When I finished, Sharon was crying silently and Brian looked bored. That's quite a story, he said. Unfortunately, it's also completely unprovable. There's no recording of this alleged conversation. Margaret Ross's house fire is being investigated as an accident. Dr. Whitmore's records were sealed by the court. Even if they existed, they'd be inadmissible. And this conspiracy theory about selling babies? He shook his head. Sergeant, I'm an attorney. I've represented the Delora family through a very difficult time. 2 children died of genetic disorders. Those deaths were investigated and ruled natural. To suggest otherwise is not only cruel, it's actionable. What about the antifreeze in Aretha's system? I demanded. What antifreeze? Sharon asked, her eyes wide. Officer, I don't know what she's talking about. Aretha has been sick, yes, but the doctor said it was a virus. Actually, Sergeant Hayes said, pulling out her phone, I have the hospital report right here. Dr. Powell sent it over. Aretha's blood work shows clear evidence of ethylene glycol poisoning, consistent with antifreeze ingestion over a period of weeks. Sharon's face went white. That's impossible. Someone must have... Who would poison a baby? Hayes asked quietly. Someone who had access to her. Someone who fed her, cared for her. She looked at Sharon. Someone like her mother. I would never hurt my daughter. Sharon's voice rose. This is insane. Darlene must have... She's been alone with Aretha. She's had opportunities. So your theory is that the grandmother poisoned the baby to frame you? Hayes raised an eyebrow. That's interesting, because according to hospital records, Aretha's symptoms began 4 months ago, long before Mrs. Watson suspected anything was wrong. She stepped closer to Sharon. But you know what's really interesting? When I ran your name through the database, 3 different states have flagged you for suspicious infant deaths. Oregon, California, and Nevada. 3 children, all under a year old, all supposedly natural causes. The odds of that happening to one person are astronomical. Those were investigated, Brian said quickly. No charges were ever filed. No charges were filed because the investigations were closed prematurely. Funny how that happens when someone knows how to work the system. Hayes looked at him. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you, Mr. Hardwick? I have no idea what you're implying. I'm implying that Dr. Powell isn't the only one who made calls tonight. After he contacted us, we reached out to colleagues in other jurisdictions. Turns out, you've represented clients in all 3 states where Sharon's children died. You've also brokered several private adoptions that raised red flags, but couldn't be proven illegal. She smiled. Small world. Brian's expression didn't change, but I saw his jaw tighten. Coincidences aren't evidence, he said. You're right, but they're enough for a warrant. Hayes nodded to another officer, who stepped forward with handcuffs. Sharon Delora, you're being detained for questioning regarding child endangerment and suspicion of poisoning. Brian Hardwick, you're also being detained as a person of interest. This is outrageous, Brian said. You have no grounds? I have a baby with poison in her system, a grandmother with credible concerns, and a pattern of suspicious deaths spanning multiple states. That's plenty of grounds. Hayes turned to me. Mrs. Watson, I'm going to need you to come to the station as well, to give a formal statement, and we'll need to take Aretha to the hospital for evaluation. No, I held Aretha tighter. I'm not letting her out of my sight. I understand. You can ride in the ambulance with her. We'll have officers present at all times. She paused. Dr. Powell will meet you there. He specifically requested to be the attending physician. I looked down at Aretha, who had finally stopped crying and was looking up at me with those trusting baby eyes. Okay, I whispered. Okay. As they led Sharon and Brian to separate patrol cars, Sharon looked back at me. The mask was gone. No more tears, no more trembling vulnerability. Just cold, calculating hatred. This isn't over, she said quietly. You have no idea what you've started. Neither do you, I replied. At the station, I sat in an interview room and told my story again and again. To Sergeant Hayes, to a detective from the state police, to someone from Child Protective Services. Each time, I added details I'd forgotten, connections I'd made. Hours passed. Aretha was at the hospital under police guard. Jason was being questioned in another room, and I was exhausted to my bones. Finally, around 4 a.m, Sergeant Hayes came back in with a laptop. Mrs. Watson, she said, I need you to look at something. She turned the screen toward me. It showed a photograph of a woman I didn't recognize. Mid-30s, dark hair, professional attire. This is Special Agent Donna Finney with the FBI. She's been investigating a human trafficking network for 6 years. A network that specializes in stealing infants and selling them through fraudulent private adoptions. Hayes scrolled through more images. The network uses corrupted medical professionals to fake infant deaths, then moves the babies through a series of intermediaries to wealthy buyers. They've operated in 12 states and moved approximately 34 children that we know of. 34? I felt sick. Your daughter-in-law and Brian Hardwick are connected to at least 15 of those cases, but we've never been able to build a case strong enough to prosecute. The documentation is too good, the witnesses too scared or complicit. She looked at me. Until tonight. Until you refuse to back down. So you believe me? I believe the evidence. Aretha's blood work, the pattern of deaths, the connections between Sharon, Brian, and the suspicious adoptions. She closed the laptop. But here's the problem. Sharon and Brian are smart. They've lawyered up. Different lawyers now. They're not talking. And without concrete proof of the trafficking network, without testimony from buyers or evidence of money changing hands, the most we might get them on is child endangerment. That's not enough. No, it's not. Which is why Agent Finney is on her way here. She thinks you might be able to help us. How? You said you overheard them talking in the barn. That Sharon mentioned 11 children she'd sold. That Brian mentioned a couple in Seattle flying out at 6 a.m. Hayes checked her watch. It's 4:15 now. If that couple is real, if they're actually at the airport waiting for a baby, we can catch them. But you don't know who they are. No, but you said Sharon mentioned they were flying to Canada. That narrows it down. There are only 2 flights to Canada leaving from Portland International between 5 and 7 a.m. She leaned forward. Mrs. Watson, I need you to think. Did Sharon or Brian say anything else? Any detail about the buyers? Names, descriptions, anything? I closed my eyes and replayed the conversation in my mind. Sharon's voice. The couple in Seattle is paying $200,000. Tax-free. Not in Seattle. From Seattle. They were from Seattle but flying out of Portland. She said the couple in Seattle. I said slowly. Not a couple. The couple. Like they'd been discussing them. Like Jason knew who they were. You think your son has met them? I think he might have their contact information. Sharon said he signed insurance papers, that he was already involved. If he's been communicating with them. I looked at Hayes. Can you check his phone? Not without his permission or a warrant. Then ask him, please. He's not a bad person. He's trapped and scared and he made terrible choices. But he loves Aretha. When he realizes she's safe, that Sharon can't hurt him anymore, maybe he'll help. Hayes studied me for a long moment. Wait here. She left. I sat alone in the interview room, watching the clock tick toward 5 a.m., toward 6 a.m., toward the moment when buyers would board a plane and disappear. The door opened. Jason stood there looking 10 years older than he had yesterday. His eyes were red from crying. Mom, he whispered. I'm so sorry. I'm so, so sorry. I stood and wrapped my arms around my son, this man-child who'd made catastrophic mistakes but was still my baby. I know, I said. I know you are. Sharon said if I didn't help, she'd tell the police I was abusing Aretha, that I'd go to prison and lose everything. And I was so tired, Mom. So tired of failing. The farm is drowning in debt. I can barely afford Aretha's medical bills. When she said we could start over, that we could have enough money to finally breathe, he pulled back, tears streaming down his face. I didn't know it was real. I swear I thought she was just talking, just venting. I didn't think she'd actually… Jason. I gripped his shoulders. The couple in Seattle. The ones who were supposed to take Aretha. Do you have their information? He nodded miserably. Sharon made me text them updates about Aretha. Photos, medical information. She said it was for the adoption agency. He pulled out his phone with shaking hands. They're named James and Patricia Westbrook. They think they're adopting through a private Christian agency. They have no idea. Sergeant Hayes was already on her phone, relaying information to someone. Got them, she said. They're at the airport. Gate B7. Boarding starts in 20 minutes. She looked at me. Mrs. Watson, this is going to move fast now. Agent Finney wants to coordinate the arrest, but she needs someone who can identify whether the Westbrooks knew what they were buying into, or if they're victims too. I'll go, I said immediately. Mom, you've been up all night. I'll go, I repeated firmly. Those people think they're getting a daughter this morning. They deserve to know the truth. And they deserve to hear it from someone who understands what it means to almost lose a grandchild. 20 minutes later, I was in an FBI vehicle racing toward Portland International Airport. Sergeant Hayes beside me and Agent Finney on speakerphone. Mrs. Watson, Finney said, her voice crisp and professional. You've done incredible work tonight. We've been chasing this network for years. But I need you to understand, the Westbrooks may be complicit. They may have known exactly what they were buying. If that's the case, don't let sympathy cloud your judgment. And if they're innocent? I asked. Then we'll help them heal. But first, we catch everyone involved. We reached the airport at 5:47 a.m. The terminal was just waking up, early morning travelers shuffling through security with coffee and carry-ons. We moved quickly through a security checkpoint. Hayes flashing credentials. Agents in plain clothes surrounding us. Gate B7. Flight to Vancouver boarding in 10 minutes. I spotted them immediately. A couple in their early 40s, well-dressed, holding hands nervously. The woman clutched an empty car seat. The man kept checking his phone. They looked like every hopeful parent I'd ever seen. Excited. Terrified. Desperate for the child they'd been promised. That's them, Hayes murmured. Ready? I nodded. We approached. The woman saw us first, saw something in our faces that made her smile falter. Can I help you? She asked carefully. Agent Finney stepped forward, badge in hand. James and Patricia Westbrook? I'm Special Agent Donna Finney with the FBI. We need to talk about the adoption you're expecting to finalize today. Patricia's face crumbled. No, please. We've done everything right. All the paperwork, all the fees. We've been waiting for 3 years. How much did you pay? Finney asked quietly. James and Patricia looked at each other. $200,000, James said. Through the Blessed Beginnings Agency. It's expensive, but they said it was all legal, that the mother had chosen us specifically, that she wanted her baby to have a better life. Did you ever meet the mother? No. The agency said she wanted privacy, that she was young and scared and didn't want contact. Patricia's voice broke. Is something wrong? Is the baby okay? The baby is safe, I said, stepping forward. But she's not the child you were supposed to get. And the mother never consented to any adoption. I watched their faces as understanding dawned. The horror, the grief, the realization that they'd been part of something monstrous without knowing it. We would never, Patricia whispered. We would never buy a stolen child. They said it was legal. They showed us documents. Those documents were fake, Finney said. The agency doesn't exist. The mother's consent was forged. You were about to cross an international border with a trafficked infant. James sat down heavily in an airport chair, his face gray. "What have we done?" "You were deceived," Hayes said. "But now we need your help. We need everything you have on the agency, on the people who contacted you, on how the money was transferred. All of it." "Anything," Patricia said immediately. "We'll give you anything. Just please tell us the baby is really safe." I looked at this couple who'd nearly destroyed my family without meaning to, who'd been so desperate for a child that they'd been willing to believe anything. "She's safe," I said. "Her name is Aretha. She's 6 months old, and she's with her real family now." Patricia started crying. Not tears of relief, tears of loss. Because somewhere in her heart, she'd already started loving the daughter she thought was coming, the daughter who was never hers to love. As FBI agents led the Westbrooks away for questioning, I stood at gate B7 and watched the sun rise through the terminal windows. It was over. Aretha was safe. The network was crumbling. But there were still 11 children out there somewhere. 11 families grieving. 11 sets of adoptive parents who might not even know they'd bought stolen babies. "Mrs. Watson?" Agent Finney approached. A real person now instead of just a voice on a phone. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe 35, with tired eyes and a determined set to her jaw. "I wanted to thank you personally. What you did tonight, refusing to back down, trusting your instincts, fighting for your granddaughter. It broke open a case we've been building for years." "What happens now?" I asked. "Now we work backward. We use Brian's records, Sharon's connections, the Westbrooks information. We track down every adoption they facilitated. We find those 11 children." She paused. "It won't be easy. Some of the adoptive families may fight us. They love those children. They've raised them. Tearing families apart, even to return children to their biological parents, is complicated. But necessary. Yes, necessary." She looked at me. "You should go home, get some rest, see your granddaughter. You've done enough." I nodded, suddenly feeling every one of my 63 years. But as I turned to leave, I had one more question. "Agent Finney? How many others are there? People like Sharon and Brian running networks like this?" She didn't answer immediately. Then, "More than you'd think, fewer than you'd fear. We shut them down when we find them." She managed a tired smile. "And sometimes, we find them because of people like you. Grandmothers who refuse to accept easy answers." I rode back to Millbrook Creek in silence as the Oregon countryside woke up around me. When I finally reached the hospital, the morning shift was just starting. Dr. Powell met me at Aretha's room. "She's sleeping," he said softly. "We've started chelation therapy for the antifreeze poisoning. She'll make a full recovery." I looked through the window at my granddaughter, so small in that hospital bed, hooked up to machines but breathing steadily. Alive, safe, mine. "Can I sit with her?" I asked. "Of course, for as long as you want." I pulled a chair beside Aretha's crib and took her tiny hand in mine. She stirred, opened her eyes, and smiled. "Hi, baby," I whispered. "Grandma's here, and I'm never letting anyone hurt you again." Behind me, I heard footsteps. Jason appeared in the doorway, escorted by a police officer but no longer in handcuffs. "Mom, can I—" His voice broke. "Can I see her?" I looked at my son, this man who'd made terrible choices, who'd nearly lost everything, who was looking at me with the same frightened eyes he'd had as a little boy when he'd done something wrong. "Yes," I said. "Come say hello to your daughter." He crossed the room and stood beside me, looking down at Aretha with such naked love and regret that my heart ached. "I'm going to be better," he whispered. "I'm going to be the father she deserves. I promise." "I know," I said. "We both will." We stood there together as the morning sun filled the room, 3 generations of one family, scarred but surviving. And I knew that whatever came next, the trials, the testimony, the long road to healing, we would face it together, because that's what families do. They fight for each other, even when, especially when, the fight seems impossible. 3 months later, I stood in my kitchen making apple pie from the fruit of our orchard, the same kitchen where I'd found that photograph, The same house where everything had nearly fallen apart. But different now. Quieter. Safer. Home again. Aretha was in her playpen by the window, babbling happily at the dust motes dancing in the October sunlight. At 9 months old, she was thriving. The antifreeze completely purged from her system, her weight up, her cheeks pink with health. Dr. Powell said she'd have no lasting effects from the poisoning, physically, at least. The emotional scars would take longer to heal, for all of us. Jason was in the barn, fixing the tractor he'd been neglecting for months. We'd had long talks, he and I. Painful conversations about weakness, desperation, the lies we tell ourselves to justify the unjustifiable. He'd pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit fraud and child endangerment. The prosecutor, considering his cooperation and the coercive circumstances, had recommended probation and mandatory counseling. He'd taken the deal, started therapy, stopped making excuses. Some days were better than others. Mom? He appeared in the doorway now, covered in grease but smiling. A real smile, the first I'd seen in months. Tractor's running, finally. That's wonderful, honey. He washed his hands at the sink, then picked up Aretha, who squealed with delight. Hey, Ladybug, were you good for Grandma? She's always good, I said, rolling out pie dough, though she did try to eat my shopping list. She's advanced for her age. He kissed Aretha's head, then looked at me. Agent Finney called. They found another one, a little boy in Arizona, 4 years old now. The family had no idea he was stolen. They'd adopted through what they thought was a legitimate agency. That makes 7, I said quietly. 7 children found, 4 more still missing. Each discovery was bittersweet. Families reunited, but adoptive parents devastated. Children confused, torn between the only parents they'd known and biological families they didn't remember. The legal battles were nightmares. The emotional toll was immeasurable, but they were alive, safe. That had to count for something. Finney also said Sharon's trial starts next month, Jason continued. The prosecutor thinks they have enough to convict on trafficking charges. 15 counts. She's looking at life without parole. I nodded, continuing to work the dough. I should have felt satisfaction, victory. But mostly, I just felt tired. Sharon had shown no remorse. Even in custody, she'd maintained that she'd been helping those children, giving them better lives. The psychological evaluation described her as having severe attachment disorder with narcissistic and antisocial features. In layman's terms, she was incapable of bonding with her own children, so she'd treated them as commodities. Brian Hardwick had flipped immediately, providing evidence in exchange for a reduced sentence. He'd revealed the whole network, the corrupted doctors, the falsified documents, the offshore accounts where the money was hidden. His testimony would put away a dozen people involved in the trafficking ring. He'd served 12 years, out in 8 with good behavior. It didn't seem like enough, but Agent Finney said it rarely did. How are you doing with all of it? I asked Jason, setting down my rolling pin. Really? He was quiet for a moment, swaying gently with Aretha. Some days I can't believe I almost let it happen, that I was so weak, so scared of being poor, that I nearly sold my own daughter. His voice cracked. What kind of person does that make me? The kind who made a terrible mistake, but also the kind who stopped it, who helped catch them, who's working every day to be better. Is that enough? I don't know, I said honestly, but it's something, and something is where we start. He nodded, blinking back tears. I'm going to sign over my share of the farm to you. You deserve to have full control after everything. Jason, no. Mom, I almost destroyed this family. And now you're rebuilding it. With me. Together. I crossed to him, put my hand on his arm. This farm has been in your father's family for 4 generations. It's Aretha's legacy, too. We're not giving up on it. We're not giving up on each other. Even after what I did? Especially after what you did. Because you came back. You chose us. I squeezed his arm. That's what matters. Not that you fell. That you got back up. The doorbell rang. Jason went to answer it while I checked the pie. When he returned, Agent Finney was with him. She looked better than the last time I'd seen her. Less exhausted, more hopeful. In her hands was a thick folder. Mrs. Watson, she said, I wanted to update you in person. We found the last 4 children. My heart leaped. All of them? All of them. The last one was in Toronto. A girl, 6 years old now. Her adoptive parents are cooperating fully. They had no idea. She set the folder on the table. 11 children, all accounted for, all safe, because you didn't give up. I had to sit down. The families, the biological families, are being notified. We're arranging meetings, counseling, legal support. It's complicated, but everyone involved is trying to do what's best for the children. She paused. Some of the biological mothers don't want the children back. They've moved on, started new families. They'd rather the kids stay with the adoptive parents who love them. And the adoptive parents? Most want to do the right thing. Some are fighting to keep the children they've raised. She sighed. There's no easy answer. These are children, not property. They have bonds, memories, lives that can't just be erased or transferred. The courts will decide custody case by case. I thought about Patricia Westbrook at the airport, crying for a daughter she'd never hold. About families across the country whose lives had been shattered by Sharon's greed. What about the mothers who do want their children back? I asked. We're working on reunification, therapy for everyone involved, supervised visits, gradual transitions when appropriate. Finney opened the folder. I wanted to show you something. These are letters from some of the biological parents. They asked me to give them to you. She handed me a stack of envelopes. I opened the first one with trembling hands. Dear Mrs. Watson, you don't know me, but you saved my son. 3 years ago, I was told my baby boy died of SIDS. I buried an empty casket. I mourned. I fell apart. Last week, the FBI told me he's alive, living in California with a family who loves him. I get to see him next month. I don't know if I'll ever get him back. Maybe it's better if I don't. He has a good life there. But knowing he's alive, that he's happy, that changes everything. Thank you for fighting. Thank you for not giving up. You gave me back my son, even if I can't hold him. Forever grateful, Sarah Mitchell. I couldn't read the rest through my tears. Jason stood behind me, his hand on my shoulder, reading over my head. Mom, he whispered, you did this. You saved all of them. We saved them, I corrected. You helped. Dr. Powell helped. Agent Finney and her team. All of us together. Finney cleared her throat. There's one more thing. The FBI wants to give you a civilian commendation for your role in breaking up the trafficking ring. The ceremony is next month in Washington. They'd like you to attend. Oh, I don't think... You should go, Jason said firmly. You earned it. And besides, Aretha and I could use a trip to D.C. Show her the monuments, let her spit up on some senators. Despite everything, I laughed. When did you become funny again? When I stopped being terrified all the time. He shifted Aretha to his other hip. Agent Finney, will other families be there? The ones we helped? Some of them, yes. They want to thank Mrs. Watson in person. I looked at the letters in my hands, at the folder full of recovered children's photos, at my son holding his daughter, the granddaughter I'd almost lost. Okay, I said, we'll go. After Agent Finney left, I finished the pie and put it in the oven. Jason took Aretha for a walk around the orchard, pointing out the apple trees, the barn, the old equipment shed, all the places that made up her heritage. I watched them from the kitchen window and thought about the last 3 months, the trials and testimonies, the media attention. Reporters camped at the farm until Sheriff Bradley ran them off. The nightmares I still had about that night in the woods, running with Aretha in my arms. But also the healing, the slow return to normal, the way Jason had thrown himself into being a better father, the way we'd learned to talk to each other honestly, without the polite distance that had crept into our relationship over the years, the way Aretha laughed now, free and easy, like a child should. My phone rang, an unknown number, but I'd learned to answer those. Too many official calls these days. Mrs. Watson? A woman's voice, hesitant. My name is Diana Fletcher. The FBI gave me your number. I hope that's okay. Of course. How can I help you? My daughter, the one Sharon took. They found her last week. She's 5 years old. living in Nevada with a couple who thought they'd adopted her legally. She paused. I'm going to meet her next month. The adoptive parents are being incredibly generous, allowing visits, working toward shared custody. And I wanted to thank you for believing something was wrong, for not letting them convince you that you were crazy. I almost did let them convince me, I admitted. There were moments when I doubted myself, but you kept going anyway. That's the thing about mothers and grandmothers. We know. We know when something's wrong with our children, even when everyone tells us we're imagining it. Her voice strengthened. You trusted that instinct. You saved my little girl. You saved all of them. After we hung up, I stood in my kitchen and let myself cry. Not sad tears exactly. More like release. Relief. The kind of crying you do when you've been holding your breath for months and can finally exhale. The oven timer went off. I pulled out the pie, golden and perfect, filling the kitchen with the scent of cinnamon and home. Jason and Aretha came back inside, both of them windblown and happy. Aretha reached for me and I took her, breathing in her baby smell, feeling the solid weight of her in my arms. Pie looks good, Jason said. It's for dinner tonight. I invited Sheriff Bradley and Dr. Powell, and Sergeant Hayes, if she can make it. I thought we should thank the people who believed us. Good idea. He washed his hands again, then started setting the table. Simple domestic movements that felt revolutionary after everything we'd been through. Mom? I've been thinking about something. What's that? The farm. It needs work. A lot of work. But I think we could make it profitable again. Not just surviving, but actually thriving. He looked at me. If you're willing to take a chance on me. On us. I looked around the kitchen. My kitchen. In the house where I'd raised my son. Where my husband's family had lived for generations. Where I'd nearly died. But also where I'd found the strength to fight. I'm willing, I said. On one condition. Anything. We do it honestly. No cutting corners, no easy money, no shortcuts. We work hard, we ask for help when we need it, and we build something Aretha can be proud of. Deal. He held out his hand, and we shook on it like business partners, like the team we were learning to become. That evening, we gathered around the dinner table. Me, Jason, Aretha in her high chair, Sheriff Bradley, Dr. Powell, and Sergeant Hayes, who'd driven an hour to join us. We ate pot roast and apple pie, and we talked about normal things. The weather, the harvest, the new coffee shop opening in town. No one mentioned the trial, the trafficking ring, the children still adjusting to their new old families. Tonight was for being grateful, for being alive, for being together. As I cleared the plates, Dr. Powell pulled me aside. How are you really doing, Darlene? Tired, I admitted. Some nights I can't sleep. I keep thinking about what could have happened. If I hadn't found those files. If I hadn't trusted my instincts. But you did. That's what matters. Is it? I looked at him. 11 families lost years with their children. The adoptive parents who raised those children in good faith are having their lives torn apart. Jason is facing criminal charges. Was it worth it? He was quiet for a moment. Then, ask me that again when Aretha graduates high school, when she gets married, when she has children of her own. Ask all those moments that would never have happened if you'd stayed quiet. I suppose you're right. I know I'm right. He smiled. You did something extraordinary, Darlene. You fought a system designed to make you doubt yourself. You beat people who were smarter, younger, better connected. You won because you refused to give up. That's not nothing. After everyone left, after Aretha was asleep and Jason had gone to his room, I sat on the porch in the October darkness. The orchard rustled in the wind, old and patient. The house creaked behind me, settling into itself. I thought about Sharon, in a cell awaiting trial. About Brian, already in prison. About the network they'd built and the lives they'd destroyed. But I also thought about the 11 children who were safe now. About the families slowly, painfully, finding their way back to each other. About second chances and new beginnings. About my granddaughter, asleep upstairs, who would grow up knowing her real family, who would run through this orchard, climb these trees, inherit this land and its stories, who would live, I pulled out my phone and opened the photo album. Pictures of Aretha, hundreds of them now. Aretha laughing. Aretha sleeping. Aretha covered in sweet potato puree. Aretha taking her first steps just last week, stumbling toward Jason with her arms outstretched. A whole future, captured in pixels and possibility. I'd almost lost all of it. But I hadn't. Because when it mattered most, I'd trusted myself. I'd fought back. I'd refused to be dismissed, diminished, or defeated. They'd underestimated me because I was old, because I was just a grandmother, because society tells us that women over 60 are invisible and powerless. They'd learned otherwise. And somewhere, 11 children were alive because of it. I stood and stretched, feeling my 63 years in my bones, but also feeling something else. Strength, pride, purpose. The farmhouse door opened behind me. Jason stuck his head out. "You okay, Mom?" "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just thinking." "About?" I looked at my son, flawed, broken, healing, just like me, just like all of us. "About how far we've come," I said, "and how far we still have to go. Together, though, right?" "Together," I agreed. He went back inside, and I stayed on the porch a moment longer, looking up at the stars. Somewhere out there were 11 children, growing up safe. Somewhere were families learning to be whole again. Somewhere were answers we hadn't found yet and battles we hadn't fought. But tonight, in this moment, there was peace. I went inside, locked the door behind me, and climbed the stairs to check on Aretha one more time. She was sleeping soundly, her tiny chest rising and falling with perfect, healthy breaths. I adjusted her blanket, kissed her forehead, and whispered what I'd told her that night in the woods, when I'd run with her in my arms toward an uncertain future. "Grandma's here, and I'm never letting anyone hurt you again." It was a promise I intended to keep. For the rest of my life, for however long that might be, I would stand guard. I would fight. I would protect what was mine with everything I had. Because that's what grandmothers do. We love fiercely. We fight relentlessly. We never, ever give up. And we make sure the next generation knows they're worth fighting for. I turned off the light and went to my own room, finally ready to sleep without nightmares. Tomorrow, we'd work on the farm. We'd continue healing. We'd build the future we'd almost lost. But tonight, we rested. All of us together, safe under one roof. Home. Now tell me, what would you have done if you were in my place? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to check out the video on your screen right now. I'm sure it will surprise you.